This exact moment, me being here on stage with you, has already happened. And no, I don't have a time machine. And no, I'm not crazy. Well, maybe a little bit. In fact, one of my students' first full sentences in Spanish was, Daniela es loca. So I'll let you decide whether or not I'm crazy. But as I said, this exact moment, me being here in this red circle, has already happened. And it happened 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I found TED Talks. And I quickly became obsessed, borderline addicted. And one day, I was sitting in front of my computer, watching a TED Talk, and this overwhelming physical emotion came over me. And I started shaking and crying because for a split second, I allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like to be here with you. And surprisingly, it's exactly what I'm feeling right now. So that is just a tiny example of how this formula of dream, do, and review works to make dreams come into existence. So in order to illustrate this formula, I'm going to share with you my journey as an entrepreneur and my journey in building Bilingual Family. So let's start with the dream. 4 years ago, during my TED addiction time, I was doing a college assignment, and again, this overwhelming physical emotion came over me. And I started shaking and crying because for a split second, I allowed myself to imagine what it would feel like to own a Spanish immersion school and to create a community of bilingual families. And I think that this desire, this dream, came from my personal experience in learning a second language. I'm from Colombia. And my mom taught me English in Colombia through real and meaningful interactions. And I wanted to share this way of teaching with families. So that was the dream. Now, the dream has 3 requirements. The first requirement is that the dream must be bigger than yourself. It must be bigger than your clothes, bigger than your car, bigger than your house, and bigger than your lifestyle. You have to care more about this dream than any of those things. Secondly, the dream has to focus on impact, on improving the lives of the people you serve. For me, it's helping families raise bilingual children. And the last requirement of the dream is that it has to give you that overwhelming physical emotion. For me, clearly, it's the shaking and the crying that tells me I'm on the right track. So let's say that we have a dream, and the dream meets all those 3 requirements. If we stop there, that's all it'll ever be, a dream. So the next thing that we must do in order to make this dream a reality is do. And that's exactly what I did. Right as I was still shaking and crying, I grabbed a pen and I started sketching a logo. And I'll share it with you. There it is. It's pretty embarrassing. I can't believe I'm sharing it with you. That's supposed to be a bee. And it's supposed to be a family, yeah. And so I sketched the logo. I created a website. And for the next 2 years, I used my college courses to solidify my understanding of bilingualism and to really research the best methods for teaching a second language so that by the time I graduated 2 years ago, I actually did it. I opened up a Spanish immersion school. And that is the do, right? Now, the do has 2 requirements. The first requirement of the do is that you cannot have any excuses. And here are 3 possible excuses I could have used to prevent me from achieving my dream. The first excuse, which many of us share, was lack of time. At the time of sketching my amazing logo, I was taking 18 college credit hours, and I was working 3 part-time jobs to pay for my college. So I really didn't have the time to make time for this dream. But when your dream makes you shake and cry, you make time for it. You stop watching TV or you stop going out, and you make time for your dream. The second excuse I could have used was lack of resources, which many of us share, at the time of actually opening up Bilingual Family, which required capital, my husband and I were living on one entry-level salary. So we really didn't have the resources. But because we didn't care about our clothes, our car, our house, or our lifestyle, our resources were not tied up in car payments, high mortgages, or vacations, and we were able to make the dream come true with the small resources that we had. And the final excuse that I could have used is something that is different for everybody. Each of us has a unique disadvantage. And I put quotes around disadvantage because in most cases, it is that disadvantage that propels us, that pushes us forward, and that gives us the strength needed for entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is hard. Making things that matter is hard. So what is a disadvantage? Maybe you're dyslexic, like Richard Branson. Or maybe you're a college dropout, like Steve Jobs. Or maybe you were abused as a child, like Oprah. Each of us has a unique disadvantage. My unique disadvantage is that I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was 12. And there have been times during the due when my husband has had to help me get dressed in the morning or put me in the bathtub for an Epsom salt bath. But when your dream makes you shake and cry, nothing can be an excuse, not even arthritis. So that is the first requirement, no excuses. The second requirement is that you have to forget about logistics. Now, that may sound like terrible business advice, and you may actually by this point think that I am crazy, that my student was right. But here's the deal. When you have a dream and you start thinking of all the possible things that could go wrong, how am I going to get that business loan? How am I going to get investors? You will be paralyzed, and you will not be able to follow your dream. So just go for it. Just do it. Do without thinking and just start. When I look back at the fact that I signed a year contract with my landlord without having the funds to cover that year contract, or the fact that I didn't have the funds to fully equip my classroom, so I had to make a lot of our materials, or the fact that I didn't have the capital to pay myself for many years, I wonder, what was I thinking? And the reality is I wasn't thinking. I just did it. I just did. That's what you have to do. So let's say that we dream and we do. And if we stop there, our dream, our project, our business will fail. And here's why. Because chances are that if your dream made you shake and cry, when you start doing, the actions that you're doing are not going to be good enough. The results of your action are not going to be good enough, and you're not going to be satisfied. And many times, this is where people quit, because they believe that it's not that their work is not good enough, they start believing that they are not good enough, and so they quit. So that is why the next part of this formula is just as important as the first two, and that is to review, and review constantly. And this is something that we do at Bilingual Family every day. We review every aspect of our business. And I'm going to share with you 3 examples of things we have reviewed. The first, I think you will all be very glad to hear, we reviewed the logo. As soon as we had enough resources to pay a designer, we redid the logo. Why? Because the dream was too beautiful, too important for that crappy logo at the top. It deserved much more. And the second thing that I want to share with you, we are constantly reviewing our teaching methods, constantly reviewing the ways in which we can serve our students. And one of the main things that we do is we actually take into account their feedback. They get to vote on materials, they get to change the rules, and they get to teach us how we should teach them. And the last example of review I want to share with you, I'm most proud of. As we started seeing that our students were producing in Spanish and that they were really understanding the language, we noticed that the biggest predictor of language success was the parents' interest in learning the language, the parents' interest in using Spanish at home. Big surprise, huh? So we knew that our focus had to be to help those families use Spanish at home. So the first thing we did is we recorded all the books in our library, and we created QR codes. I actually didn't know what that was until I created the little library, but that's part of reviewing. You have to learn. And that has helped our families read with their children at home in Spanish, even if they're not native speakers. And we got great feedback from the QR codes, so we started using them as routines so that parents could use Spanish during their daily routines with their children, very much like the daily routines that my mom used with me so many years ago. So we really have come full circle back to the dream. So with review, there's only one requirement, and that is that you must grow constantly. Now, I want to make this very clear, because when I say grow, I don't mean grow in profits or, in my case, grow in the amount of students, but rather grow in the value that you provide for your community, the value that you provide for your tribe, as Seth Godin calls it. Now, don't get me wrong, we have grown tremendously. We started with one teacher and one student on the very first Monday, and I was also as the teacher, the director, the secretary, the janitor, the graphic designer, very awesome graphic designer. And in 2 years, we have grown to over 30 students, 4 teachers, and we doubled our rent space, and we can actually pay for it now. And so the main focus has to be on growing your value, on improving the lives of the people you serve. So here's my challenge to you. Each of us has a unique gift, a dream that makes us shake and cry. And it is our responsibility to the world and to ourselves to make that dream a reality. So here's the real challenge. Are you ready? Dream passionately, do illogically, and review constantly. Dream, do, and review. Thank you.